I want to thank CHS for having me here today. I worked at CHS for many years, and I was just thinking today about Alex Katahakis and all the many things that I've loved about her being my mentor and supervisor for so many years. And one of the things that was so beautiful about working with her is I got to learn her style of exploring what healthy sexuality is for each individual person. Many people, they come in with problematic sexual behavior, pornography, or anything along that spectrum. And once they are able to stop the addictive behavior, the question then comes in, well, what the heck is healthy sexuality? And getting to explore from the ground up that which they have been potentially numbing or medicating or running from, or not even asking themselves, who am I as a sexual person? So one of the things I've noticed over the years is when we work with porn addiction and you're able to help a porn addict stop the behavior that's hurting his or her life. But I'm going to actually speak more about men today. Frankly, men are who show up in my office. My clientele has been 90 to 99% male over the years. I didn't ask for it. I didn't plan it, but that's just what's happened. And so in being able to work with men who have problematic or addictive pornography use, the thing that I then got to work with them on as they became sober and then well into recovery from being sober is, what the hell is masculinity? What's healthy masculinity? Who am I as a man? And being able to explore it now that they weren't consistently using their drug of choice, which was pornography, to medicate, to numb, to distract, or even, as we're going to talk about today, to act out or try to heal or understand some of the things that make them tick on the inside. So the term toxic masculinity it's really been in pop culture for, I'd say, the last 5 to 10 years, especially the last year or two. It's been talked about a lot more, and it's been vilified, the term itself. A lot of people have a problem with the term. I actually don't have a problem with the term toxic masculinity, because what people are saying is that the term toxic masculinity is vilifying all masculinity. That's not at all what it is. To say toxic masculinity means, I believe, taking the natural drives, the natural masculine drives in this world, and unfortunately, either because we are taught in ways that aren't very healthy when we're young, or the lack of teaching of very healthy and loving ways to use that masculine energy, it gets diverted, it gets channeled in different ways. So to say toxic, or we can just call it unhealthy masculinity versus healthy masculinity, is a part of what we're going to talk about today, of what I work with men that I treat, and I hope that people are talking about and actually just integrating more into their lives around the world. And if we're going to talk about masculinity, we have to be talking about porn as well. A lot of porn addicts have come into my office through the years, and I've had the great honor to be able to work with them at having secrets and having a lifestyle that is hurting them and hurting other people, to being with them and being able to see them come through it, and actually be able to be with an intimacy inside of themselves and an intimacy with other people. And I think the biggest problem about porn right now is that we're not talking about it as a society. Porn just is. It's a part of so many people's lives, but it remains buried, it remains secretive or shameful to some people to talk about. And that's one of my missions, is to get that into the conversation about what we're all comfortable talking about, whether it's in our relationships and our friendships, with our therapist, or with anybody that is appropriate to be able to say, this is part of what's in my life, and it's either working for me or it's not. And we're going to explore today the difference between someone watching or using porn and someone being addicted to porn. In fact, that's the first thing we're going to cover today. And I want to say here, I personally don't have any moralistic or religious or ethical judgment about whether someone should or should not watch porn. That is completely up to that person, as long as it's not hurting other people. And we're going to talk more about, there are problems with pornography. There is abuse because of pornography, and in some people it's killing their lives. However, this lecture and anything I talk about isn't about teaching people why porn is bad or wrong or why they shouldn't do it. People come into my office and they say, my life, like my house is burning down, so to speak. My life is worse. I'm ruining my relationships. I'm risking legally, I'm risking my job, I'm risking my relationship, my family. Can you help me stop because I can't stop? That's what we're talking about today. So if anybody does think that porn is bad or wrong or is a sin, I support you. That's great. It's some of the people who come into my office, they also hold that belief, and I want to respect anything anybody believes. But today we're really talking about porn as a whole and as an addiction and what we do about it, and how I work with men to realize the feelings underneath, especially anger, and how to channel their natural masculine energy in healthy ways. So let's go to the PowerPoint. I'm going to start with this. This is my podcast, as Doug mentioned earlier. It's called A Brave New Man. If you love podcasts and want to hear more about healthy sexuality, healthy masculinity, femininity, men and women listen, all genders, all ages. And we talk a lot about relationships and different things. Alex Katahakis was on an amazing episode several weeks ago about consent, sexual consent in the Me Too era. And I strongly recommend you go listen, because it was one of those conversations just went and went. And I didn't want to edit a bit of it, so I just left the whole thing in. So go check that if you wish. If you want to follow us on Instagram, this is it, A Brave New Man Pod, at A Brave New Man Pod. You can see our dear friend Alex in one of her pictures right in the middle of our feed. And I have quotes and talk about upcoming episodes and things that really relate to what we're talking about here today, which is healthy masculinity versus ways that we are unhealthy in certain relationships. So here's what we're talking about today. We're going to start with pornography addiction. Now, first of all, what is pornography addiction? How, as clinicians, to assess for it, and even, by the way, how to assess for it within ourselves. And then lastly, on the porn addiction, how to treat it and how to contain it. Then we're going to talk about anger and unresolved issues. So that's two things. One is, what emotional unresolved material are people trying to work through in some of the porn that they choose? And then secondarily, once they are sober, what are the underlying issues of anger that they now have a chance to deal with, right? To realize what's underneath it, to be able for us to heal the hurt underneath it. That segues into toxic masculinity, as we were talking about it a moment ago, and then healthy masculinity, how I define healthy masculinity and how I work with men to understand and accept that so much of the natural drive within them is healthy, and then they can harness it against maybe some of the cultural things they've learned over time. So let's talk about porn's upside very quickly. It does have some, of course. It can be educational. Some people watching porn might have never known what goes where, what does sex look like, what does it feel like, what are the body parts. It's like, it can be educating in a positive way. It can also be fun and exciting. Obviously, it's like, that's one of the reasons why people go to it, is they find it exciting. It can be shame reducing. So a lot of times in our families of origin, people receive shaming messages about their sexual desire or their sexuality or their sexual orientation. And what they see when they watch porn is some freeing part of, other people are sexual too, so my desire to be sexual, maybe it's not so bad, as well as normalizing homosexual, bisexual feelings and orientations, that people can go online and say, oh, there are other people like me. Here's what it looks like when someone is doing what I want to do with other people, meaning that it's teaching them that it's not bad or wrong or sinful if other people are doing what they want to do as well. So it's confidence building, or it can be. It can be experimental and sexy. People can learn, oh, wow, I don't know that, or that makes me feel like I want to try this with my partner, or this is a role play thing I'm learning I'd like to do. And then it also normalizes masturbation for teenagers. So when I was a teenager, it's like nobody admitted that they masturbated. It was like the cardinal sin. So everybody was doing it, most everybody, but nobody would talk about it because it meant you were sick or wrong or weird. So to know that they make porn for that, a lot of teenagers are able to see that porn and realize, oh, I get it. The fact that I am aroused and want to masturbate is a healthy thing. Now, we're going to talk about whether or not that's a healthy thing for them to be doing with their brain, because that's a completely separate issue. It can also be, porn can be soothing or distracting from unpleasant emotions, like a lot of things, like eating, like television, like running and exercise. So porn is a distraction. Sometimes if people are lonely or having a hard day or stress, that happens a lot, they can watch porn and it can really distract them. So it helps people in certain ways. Now, why is it a problem? Well, going right back to, it's teaching sex education to people, but in general, the vast majority of pornography is made by men for men, by men for men. So it's for what they believe men want to watch. And therefore, it's constructed in a way that isn't very mutual. It shows what they believe men want to watch and will be aroused by. So they're teaching people how to have sex, but in many instances, they're teaching them wrong. What might not really feel good, or you see people in porn being ridiculously turned on by something that in real life people are like, no, stop, that hurts, or that's just not connected, or that doesn't feel good to me. So people start to watch porn, and if they don't know any better, they start to think this is a one size fits all, and I'm this, you know, if it's a man, I'm this man about town, now I know all these things to do, but their partners are going, why are you doing that? There's abuse and there's exploitation in porn, in the industry for sure, and as a result of it. Years ago, a porn star came forward and said that she was raped on a set during filming. Now, they never released the film. People attacked her. And one of the things that made me so angry and so sad is one of the things I heard was, you can't be raped, you're a porn star. That made my blood boil. And I felt like, is that the community here, that people are watching these performers and having this dehumanizing effect on who they are, that someone would say something, excuse me, as vile as that a human being can't be raped just because she's a porn star. There's abuse and exploitation outside of porn. I believe that it creates an entitlement for people to believe they should have it how they want it, when they want it, and that it should all be centered around them because that's what they see in porn. It also has redefined expectations. So in a lot of teenagers who, or late teenagers or even mid-teens who report their first sexual experience, they're reporting things that happened to them that they didn't consent to, things that people see in porn and think are just totally normal. Kids and teens are watching, that's a problem. I'm so grateful there wasn't internet pornography when I was in my teens, because frankly, our brains just aren't ready for it. Some of the images and videos can be traumatic to adults, let alone teens who are, you know, coming upon their sexuality for the first time ever. And then it does impact society. Young people, mostly young women, what I see, are wearing the type of things that porn stars wore on the box covers of 90s and 2000s porn. So it's this highly, highly sexualized, highly sexually charged energy that is on society here. And I think they're asking for energy that they may not know what to do with. So for individuals, why is pornography a problem? Well, it's not necessarily, unless it is. So the evolution of modern pornography is really important. I'm not going to go through all of it, but I want to draw your attention to that bottom box, second to the left, where it says in big capital letters, free streaming porn. Free streaming porn changed pornography forever. If you like podcasts, after you listen to Alex Katahakis on A Brave New Man, go and listen to, it's a serial podcast and it's called The Butterfly Effect. And what this person does, he traces, he finds the person who invented, so to speak, free streaming pornography, which was like the YouTube version of porn, where anyone could upload anything they wanted and people could just go watch it for free. This changed porn drastically. Why? Because everything was now accessible like that. This was when people started having 8, 10, 20 tabs open on their browser because they're just searching for all these different types of pornography and they can watch these videos for free. So the reason it changed it is because it changed the appetite of the viewers of porn. Suddenly, to pay $5, $10 and be able to watch a movie once, that was just boring to people. Their brain said, so what? I want something new and different and visceral. And this free streaming porn, just like on YouTube, where if I'm interested in what happened in a tennis match a couple days ago, or something that happened in pop culture or in government, I can Google it, I can YouTube it, and I can see videos. That's how porn has been for many years now. So what that created, it didn't create gonzo porn, but it created the proliferation of where gonzo porn just exploded. It means it comes from gonzo journalism, where like the reporter is right there, right a part of the action. It's really low budget. It's basically like someone just holding like a camcorder. It's really easy to make. It's really easy to edit. And it tends to have more gritty, more visceral or extreme genital close-ups. And here's where it really changed things. The themes in everyday porn, what people used to call vanilla porn, like what you would just go on and say, oh, what's happening in porn now, became much more humiliating, much more intense, more violent, more abusive. So in the old days, so to speak, it might have been hard to find a DVD or a VHS tape of something that was really visceral or aggressive or humiliating to somebody. But because of free streaming porn, people could find it like that. All they have to do is type it into the search engine. And it escalated the wants and needs of pornographic viewers. So it changed from people wanting to stay up on what's new in porn and what's happening in porn to porn needing to stay up with the needs of the viewer. Does that make sense? So the producers of porn, and I've watched some documentaries on this, they say suddenly like people want more violent stuff. Like, what are we going to have to do in the future? Like actually kill somebody on screen? Because it's just getting that they were having requests, and the stuff that they would make that was violent and humiliating was gobbled up like crazy. And the way they make money on these porn hosting sites is obviously by click. It's just like YouTube. So they're advertisers, and the more people watch, the more money they made. And so what they realized was people want this. And just like YouTube, they would find a little clip that they might see. Oh, what's this? This is a little darker, a little more violent, a little more disturbing than what I watch. They would click on that, and that could take them into whole new worlds of pornography that they've never seen before. I have worked with young men who have said, I can't unsee some of the images that I saw in porn. That breaks my heart, because they are being traumatized by something that they originally got into watching so that they could have some sort of sexual fulfillment or excitement. So it has escalated and blown up what we have known as pornography. So dopamine, that is one of the things that is the main driver of addiction with pornography. It's that feel-good chemical in the brain. It says, look over here. It's like fireworks and neon lights, and it's basically saying something new and different and exciting is over here, and it makes you pay attention, and it gives you horse blinders. So suddenly it's like everything in the world is now, the dopamine says, focus right here on what's in front of you, because it is really, really important. And that happens over and over again. Same with cocaine use, same with pornography and gaming addiction. So all three of those things, they hyper stimulate this dopamine cycle inside of the brain. So it actually, I've heard people joke and say porn addiction is a chemical addiction. It's just a neurochemical addiction, because their brain becomes dependent on the dopamine, not necessarily the porn. So what happens over time is when dopamine is hyper-stimulated, when you have 10, 12, 20 tabs open of pornography, you're seeing things that are dark and visceral and different, and you're having something new and wild, and you're just getting all this new stuff all over and over again. You're hyper-stimulating the brain with dopamine, and then the receptors in the brain to dopamine, they become blunted, so that you need greater levels of stimulation in order to achieve that same amount of excitement that you used to get from the type of porn you used to watch. So it says here at the bottom of the screen, in porn addiction, tolerance is measured as variety. So in chemical addiction, it's measured by volume. It used to take me 5 beers to get drunk. Then it was 8, then it was 12, then it was hard liquor and beer, and on it goes. That's true with all chemical drugs. In porn addiction, tolerance is measured by variety. So if what I'm watching right now suddenly isn't turning me on and the dopamine isn't happening anymore like I want it to, I need to find something different, something new. And nowhere in the world is there as much new and different from a moment-to-moment basis as there is in internet pornography. So they're going to find that variety, and it takes some people, not all, some addicts of porn. They go into darker and darker realms, and they have a hard time getting out of it, because now they're watching things that are disturbing to them as well as a turn on. So online pornography has been called the crack cocaine of sexual compulsivity, because no real life partner can compete with the dopamine blasts that are created by internet pornography. and it can create addiction where there is no addictive template. So does that mean that porn is, because it has more dopamine, is better than sex? Obviously, that's not the case. I would want anybody to have a very healthy, in-person, terrestrial sex life that involves other human beings, other consenting human beings, not something that is just two-dimensional where they're in control. However, as far as dopamine is concerned, it can create addiction even when the person didn't have like an addictive personality to begin with. So it's an intimacy killer. I've worked with so many people and so many couples who basically say, the partner of a porn addict says, I felt unattractive, I felt unworthy, I felt like I was fat or ugly, or that I was just old, or that I wasn't good in bed, because they didn't realize that the other person, right, the other woman, the other man in the relationship wasn't a person at all, it was porn. Their spouse or partner was acting out with porn, and they were feeling rejected because of it. So they weren't doing anything wrong. There was certainly nothing wrong with it, but they were feeling rejected and sad, and that's traumatic to a partner. And the brain attaches, it rewires itself to the porn experience, to a heightened dopamine experience that a person-to-person contact can't create, like I said before. So what happens when someone is addicted to porn is their brain wires itself around an isolated sexual experience. It's visceral in a dopamine way. They are in complete control. It's completely self-centered, and it's detached from other human beings. So they get to be the center of their own sexual universe. It's what I want, when I want it, how I want it. And if they don't like this scene or they don't like watching this body part, they skip just like that, right? They're in complete control. They get in the room with an actual human being, it's completely different. I say at the bottom here that pornography addiction versus getting into bed with another human being is like playing Candy Crush all day and then sitting down and reading a book. If you love literature and you love to read, but then you are engaging with something on your phone that is just hyper stimulating your dopamine, reading a book is going to be boring. Or at the very least, your brain is going to be wanting something else. Same is true with porn addicts. They get in bed with a partner, with somebody else, and their brain and body, they feel like a record scratch, for those of you in my generation who are old enough to remember what that means. Their brain is like, or a dog with their head tilted, like, wait, what is this? This isn't what I'm conditioned to getting aroused by every day. And so they're actually, it's not like they're starting from scratch. It's like there's this huge hurdle, and the partners feel it and the people feel it. And a lot of shame comes on both sides because of that. And then people say, it's like, I can't wait till my partner leaves the house because then I get to engage with my drug of choice. That kills intimacy as well. So people want this experience that is like their porn use, and they get so used to it that it hurts their relationships. So there are a lot of assessment tools for pornography addiction, and I've put one here on the screen for us to look at. There's also the ISST, the Internet Sex Addiction Screening Test. There's the SAST, which is a Sex Addiction Screening Test. There's PATHOS, P-A-T-H-O-S, which is a sex addiction and a porn screening test. You can find all these things online. I know CHS has at least the ISST on their website. And then this is one that I have on my website. Let's go through these quickly. This is for people to self-assess. Not do I like porn, not how much do I watch porn, but am I addicted to porn? Now, this isn't what we're looking at here an end-all, be-all, but it's an assessment where someone can say, do I need to go talk to somebody about this? Have you had ongoing but unsuccessful attempts to stop, reduce, or control your porn use? Okay, so have I tried to stop and I can't? And a lot of the people that walk into my office, they say, yes, I've tried anywhere between 20 and 500 times to stop. I always go back to it. Have you spent inordinate amounts of time watching pornography or recovering from it to the extent that it has taken away time from occupational, social, domestic, or academic obligations? Yet again, so many men that I work with have said, absolutely. Like I've been worse at my job, worse in my relationship, blown off appointments, all because I was watching porn. Have there been harmful consequences to your relationship or sex life due to your porn use? This is what we were just talking about a second ago. So whether your partner knows it or not, is it affecting your sex life? Or if you're single, is it affecting your drive to actually be in the terrestrial world, meeting people relationally or sexually? Do you need to watch more visceral or violent types of pornography than you used to in order to become aroused by porn? We just talked all about that. And finally, do you become irritable, restless, or annoyed if you're unable to watch porn? Yes, there is withdrawal from porn addiction. People experience this a lot of the time emotionally, sometimes physically as well. But I say to people when they're stopping, please expect that you are going to have a restless, irritable week. And if that's happening, don't think something's wrong. It's just another confirmation that your brain and your body have become reliant on porn in order to get through the day. And now you're able to actually sit with what is coming up without your drug of choice. So, treatment and containment. What do? We assess that someone is a porn addict. They come in, they talk to us. There are a lot of questions to ask about it. But basically that assessment we just took is that, is it a problem in your life bad enough? And then say on there, 2 or more of those on the previous screen would say, yeah, you should probably go talk to someone more about it. So let's say someone comes in and you do assess from any of the instruments I talked about and from you talking to the person in a longer intake process, that porn is a problem, that porn is an addiction. The first thing I try to do with the people is to say, try to stop without shame, right? Without judgment, without telling them that they're bad or wrong, to really join with them and say, yeah, from everything you're telling me, it sounds like porn is a big problem in your life. For you, porn may not be something you can control. So from now until the next time we meet together, try stopping. Let's see how it goes. And that includes masturbating for some. Now, I would take this week to week. I see here, I've put on the slide that a 30-day period, a 90-day trial period is something that some addicts want to try to basically reset their system. I've heard Gary Wilson is a researcher and an educator, and he has said that for people, I'm making up the age now, something like 35 years or older who are porn addicts, it takes about 30 days for them to rewire their brain if they stop watching porn, if they're addicted, and if they stop masturbating. For people who are younger than 35, or maybe we might even say younger than 30, he says it takes 90 days. Why? The reason is because they've been watching porn from the time that their brains were so malleable in their adolescence. And they've been watching porn, high-speed internet porn, whereas the people 30, 35 or over have not. So their brain is much, much more dependent on porn being their main sexual outlet. So it takes a longer time to rewire the brain. So I would say, try to stop. Don't shame yourself. Don't be angry at yourself. Don't be guilty. Just try to stop. Let's see how that goes. Again, expect withdrawal symptoms. I would normalize them way ahead of time. I would say, can you plan a week where you're going to be supportive to yourself this week? If you're just stopping for the first time, can you do things that are nurturing, that are healthy, and that involve other people and connection with other people? And don't think, again, something's going wrong because you're finding yourself irritable or angry, because this has been something you've used like a drug. Now, I try to get people to go to a 12-step meeting. Sex Addicts Anonymous, SAA, is the first one I've listed on here. That's one of the fellowships that I ask guys to go visit. And I say, find a meeting. In LA, there were something like 96 to 100 meetings a couple years ago, every single week in LA. I love that. Find a meeting that's convenient to you. You don't have to talk. You don't have to go tell your life story. You don't even have to say your name if you don't want to. Just go and listen and sit through. You're going to hear people talk about things that are not porn related, but you're going to hear people talk about porn as well. And can you listen for the things inside of people's shares that you feel like are similar to what you're going through? That is really, really helpful to the brain, and to realize there's an us and I'm not alone. So I try to get them to go to a 12-step meeting and hopefully make that a part of their ongoing recovery. And so in the first week, I asked them to call and check in with me. That's not something that I want to have ongoing. I want eventually that to transfer to somebody in a recovery program. But I want them to at least pick up the phone and say, how's it going? Let me know. Leave me a message. 3 days, 4 days into your week, were you able to abstain from porn? How are you feeling? How are you doing? Someone out there cares about you and what you're going through. And also have them check out a web filter or a blocker. That can be for their phone, for their laptop. if somebody wants to watch porn, they're going to be able to get around any web blocker. They can just uninstall it, even if they've given someone else the passcode. We're going to find a way. There's just too many ways. But this puts a hurdle in front of them, right? If they're used to watching porn over and over again every day, or at least, you know, many times a week, this gives them a stopping point where before they get around their blocker, they can say, wait, do I want to do this? Or should I just stop right now? Other things, reading. I want to give them something to read. Here are 4 books I put on here. In the Shadows of the Net, that is the internet porn version of Out of the Shadows. Untangling the Web, another one, Your Brain on Porn, which has a lot of anecdotes telling about people, clients who have come in, and couples and individual clients in this book. And then The Porn Trap. I'm sorry, I mixed those up. Your Brain on Porn is Gary Wilson talking about the neuroscience of pornography addiction. The Porn Trap is the one has a lot of anecdotes about people who have been in. And then I want them online. Now, yes, I'm telling them to go online on their computer or their phone, which has been their method of watching porn. I acknowledge it. I talk to them about it. We get it. However, there are so many forums and places they can get support so they don't feel so alone, and they can occupy some of that time actually healing. On Reddit, there's a whole movement called NoFap, and that is helping people, especially young men, abstain from pornography and masturbating if it's been a problem in their life. Sexandrelationshiphealing.com, they have a lot of Q&A, they have a lot of reading, they have videos, and then they also have free online groups that are hosted by a professional. FightTheNewDrug.org and Your Brain on Porn. That's going to teach you about the neurology, or teach the person who needs it about what's happening in their brain, and it doesn't normalize what's going on for them. And then program calls. So that usually comes after several weeks or even months of going to SAA or any other 12-step meeting. But I want to get them with phone numbers in their phone, because that is going to be the life preserver when they're about to sink. When they have been sober from their drug of choice, which is pornography, for however long it is, and they're getting the thoughts and the feelings of, oh, maybe I should, maybe I'll just watch it once. Who cares? This is BS. I should just do it. I tell them over and over again, call somebody. The therapist isn't always going to be available, but if they have 3, 5, 10 or more numbers, they can text, they can call, and they can reach out to their program brothers and say, I need help. I'm going to watch porn right now. Help talk me off the ledge. That is going to be one of the best things they can do, because left to their own devices, that's what gets us into addiction. That's what got them into using porn as a drug for so long. So to be connected with other people, connection is the opposite of addiction. And that's one of the reasons why I think program calls are so important for people. So very quickly, I want to go through a few of the emotions that come up as people are watching pornography. Shame and inadequacy that are pre-existing inside of them can play out in the type of porn they watch. A few examples here. Themes of humiliation, whether it's cuckolding, degradation, minimization, that people aren't aware that they have feelings of shame inside, and they're watching porn, not realizing that they're trying to work these issues out, but it's not going to work because they've sexualized it. Fetishes that reduce the performers to a nothing, someone in the scene being less than or not enough, and then power, needing to be powerful over someone, or having someone be very powerful over the other person that they can identify, and it's a way that they have sexualized this feeling of shame or inadequacy. We're going to talk more about that. Always, as with anything in therapy, attend to trauma. Many scenes in pornography, users realize in time and through recovery that they were watching something that was re-traumatizing abuse they had been through. That could be sexual abuse, if there was rape or sexual assault in their past. Unfortunately, so many people have realized when they took a step away that they were watching those type of scenes because that was their way of trying to work through their own trauma. But it doesn't have to be sexual. All trauma, relational or otherwise, can be enacted in scenes of porn where people are watching someone being shamed, beaten, abused, and that is a part of them reenacting their trauma. So go slow. Don't push the client. Use your own therapeutic process, your own therapeutic style to process that trauma, and to consider any trauma modalities that you use, but to realize with the client and help them to discover that they were using using porn in this way because they weren't dealing with the trauma underneath. So eroticized rage. What this means is that unresolved feelings of hurt and anger have been sexualized and become a part of the person's arousal template. So it becomes sexualized so that the person becomes turned on and aroused instead of angry. You see, they don't realize it, but they aren't sitting with the anger they have toward themselves, towards others, toward their parents, toward their partner, towards entire genders, towards sexuality. And instead, it's become just a part of what they think is hot. So watching these scenes, like we talked about earlier, these really visceral, humiliating, dominating scenes, it becomes hot to somebody. And they don't realize that the reason it's hot is because they have this hurt inside of them and this anger that they want to see someone abused. But like I said, it's become part of their arousal template. So they're not sitting with the fact that there's all this emotion, undealt with anger that is feeding their addiction. So spitting, choking, gagging, humiliating, hurting, name-calling, slapping, degrading, and many, many other things are part of what some people get their eroticized rage satisfied with because it turns them on to see other people hurt. It can be overt or it can be subtle. A viewer can identify with either of the performers. So they could say, let's say there's a stripper in the scene. Well, they can say, oh, that stripper has all the power because this person is paying. Or the viewer can say, no, the person paying has all the power because they're in charge financially and they can make this person do whatever they want. It really just has to do with whatever template that person is putting onto the porn that turns them on. And then many standard actions in pornography can be feeding anger. That doesn't mean that they are, but they can be. So a lot of things like the way a common way that a porn scene ends or things like that, where someone is ejaculating on top of someone else, that could just be something that someone finds hot or something that someone doesn't find hot. But for some, it's a way that they get to see their eroticized rage come to life. It's like an ownership. It's a domination. So it all depends on the filter of the person watching. And so many men I have worked with fall into this category at the bottom of this slide here. They say, when I was younger, when I was a teen, I couldn't get that beautiful man, that beautiful woman, the cheerleader, the quarterback in high school. They never had the crush on me like I did for them. So porn is just their way of getting. I finally get to have you. Now it's not the exact same person, but I get to see the beautiful, hot, sexy person naked, doing all the things I wanted to do with them, but now I get to see it with you. I see that in so many of the men that I work with, where they realize they get to have one up on the porn performer, even if they don't know the performers, even though it's on a two-dimensional screen, but they're still acting out this unresolved issue inside of them. So this is a huge headline for so many men that I work with. Anger is an expression of hurt, right? Or fear or pain, of course. So I try to get this as like a mathematical equation for the men that I work with. When you're angry, a part of you has been hurt, and that's okay. So when someone says, I was really pissed off, or I really wanted it, and I want to yell, I want to scream, I try to stop them and very gently ask, where were your feelings hurt in this interaction? Where was your sense of self-hurt that anger came to your defense? Because we're talking about men and anger here. Boys, when we're little, we're shamed by peers for showing emotions. We're shamed. You can name call, you can say F you can push somebody or punch somebody, but to say, hey, Joe, you really hurt my feelings, you are subject to mockery. And at that age, as kids, and especially even, well, not especially, but as teens as well, that's everything. We need our social support. We want validation. And so for people to make fun of us or put us down, that's everything. And so boys, most times, they learn to stop their anger, right? They learn not to sometimes even say, I'm angry. They just want to talk about what you did was wrong or put you down. So as adults, a lot of times it's manifests in men as, I'm fine, or I'm angry, let's say, if they're aware, like, F you, or you did something wrong, as opposed to, hey, you really hurt my feelings. So teaching men that it's okay to be vulnerable is a huge part of my work. And this is the type of work that starts usually when someone has been able to stop and become sober from porn, so they can actually deal with the feelings underneath the surface that are coming up. So our work as clinicians is help men get in with their feelings and to teach them how to express themselves. So I try to model that as a therapist and basically say, I have hurt, I have shame. I wouldn't want a therapist who hasn't. I have sadness. It's like we all have these feelings. It's just that you were taught not to express it. You were taught not even to know that you were feeling it. So to start with, if I say, I don't know what I'm feeling, to ask, where do you feel it in your body? Well, there's a buzzing in my chest. Okay, what is that buzzing saying? Or there's a queasiness in my stomach, or my face is hot. Awesome. Let's start with those physical sensations. And we want to psychoeducate about feelings that can underlie anger and normalize, again, that we all have emotions. And this is so important because so much of the time, when I ask a man, what are you feeling right now? 80, 90% of the time, they say, well, it's just not fair. Well, I was just thinking about this thing from my past. Well, I feel, it's always a thought. Not always. It's usually a thought. And as a fellow man, I try to get these men to really sit with, hold on, that's okay that you came back with a thought, but did you notice you didn't come back with a feeling or an emotion? Sometimes we need a multiple choice. That's fine. I don't know what I was feeling. Okay. Were you feeling sad, hurt, angry, ashamed, or many other things, nervous, stressed? And that gives them an opportunity to say, yes, that one. Yeah, I was feeling ashamed. That's what it was. And we can start to normalize that it's okay and to tell them, you've been trained not to feel your feelings. So it's okay that you're not aware of what you're feeling or to express them. And that is one of the things that has created this toxic masculinity that we talked about. Emotions are suppressed, maintaining an appearance of being hard or tough. Violence equaling power. So if I'm going to be a powerful man, I have to be tough. I have to be ready to fight or hurt somebody. Toxic masculinity is aggressive, which basically means I want what I want when I want it, and I don't care who else needs anything. I don't care what your needs are. I need what I want, and I'm willing to push anyone out of the way. That doesn't feel good to other people. It's exclusive of other people. Bullying is part of toxic masculinity. And as bullying is, minimizing other people. So needing to put other people down, this sort of chest beating, cat calling, name calling, putting down of other people, or violence or aggression that is just hurtful to all people, right? That is masculinity in its pure form, is driven, it is strong. It's a natural and awesome energy. But when it doesn't get harnessed in the right direction, that's when it becomes toxic, like we say here. So in pornography, very quickly, toxic masculinity shows up in some of the ways we said before. Degrading porn, selfish, someone just needing their needs met, phallocentric, it's all about the penis, it's all about what they want, it's all about them. It can be violent. It focuses sex on the pleasure of only one participant, not all, right? There's an owning of the sexual partner. I get what I want. I'm one up on you. I'm stronger than you, more powerful than you. It's void of emotions. There's very little intimacy in the vast, vast, vast majority of porn. And it's dominating. These are just the same part of this toxic masculinity. Now, healthy masculinity. I've come up with 4 pillars. We talk a lot about this on the podcast of what healthy masculinity is. And I want to be clear about something. I believe this is the exact same drive, right? Men have a natural drive to push forward, to conquer, to lead the way, to be strong, to be assertive. That's great. We don't want to take any of that away. We just want to take it in the ways that it's become bastardized, right? The way that it's become, toxic and rechannel that energy into better ways. So not to say, don't be masculine. We want you to just be a feminine person. No, our femininity is great. Our masculinity is great. But strong is the first of the many ways. Strong as a masculine man means I have a sense of self. I am rooted and grounded. I am lovable and valuable. And I know that. I don't crumble when you insult me. I don't need to put you down in order for me to feel good. We see a lot of this in politics today. I am not fragile so that an insult just crushes me to the ground and then I need to lash out. Strong in a sense of I'm okay, I'm lovable, so are you, and we can both be who we are and not need each other in order to feel good about ourselves. We need each other as far as connection and love, but I don't need you to approve of me in order for me to know I'm good. Vulnerable is the second pillar. I allow other people to see my emotions. It's what I say to people. Can you, as a man, feel your feelings and realize that it might not have been safe decades ago as a boy or even as a teenager. You may have received messaging in your family of origin or through your peers that you're weak or that you're a pussy or that you're a girl or whatever it is, all these names that people call. But rather, we all have emotions. We all do. And starting in therapy, maybe, can you start to feel and acknowledge and express your emotions with somebody who understands, somebody who's compassionate and who loves that that's what's happening in the room, because that is one of the ways that intimacy is created. And I heard it once said that perfect vulnerability is perfect strength. What I make of that is, if I feel strong enough inside of myself that I can tell you where I feel weak, where I feel ashamed, guilty, that means because I am rooted in myself that I can share those things with you and I don't feel so vulnerable, right? But it's sharing those parts with ourselves that hurt sometimes. That's part of healthy masculinity. Empathetic and loving. We have to be curious, right? We have to be inclusive of other people. And we have to want to know what other people's experiences are outside of our own. We tend to know what's best for other people, even when we don't. And so as men, that's one of the things I work with myself and clients and I don't know, anybody who will listen is, can you open your heart? And as Brene Brown says, can you at least take the perspective of someone else? Can you imagine what it was like to be this other person going through that? Your heart will open to them as a result. The words that will come out of your mouth will be good, empathetic, loving words, but it starts with just taking the perspective that other people have different feelings and thoughts, and can I open my heart and resonate with that part of me that knows that feeling that they're going through? Finally, assertive. This is a natural drive and it's a good one. I move toward what I want, but I take other people's needs into account. So we are driven. We have things we want and need and desire. I wouldn't tell anyone that in order to stop being in their toxic masculinity, they need to stop going toward what they want or only care about the needs of others. I think that's on the other end of the spectrum. But rather, I know what I want relationally or in business or in my life or in my health. I'm going to move toward that, but I'm going to understand that I live in a world of other people. How do I make the world better for myself and others? So I'll tell people, go with that drive. Be assertive. Just don't be aggressive where all you care about is yourself. Okay. So lastly, I'm sharing this slide again. Feel free, here's my contact information on there. If you ever have questions, I know we're going to do questions and answers here in just a second. If you have anything, you can always email me here, gregwoodhillmft@gmail.com. Obviously, if you have questions about the treatment of anything, the Center for Healthy Sex is an absolutely beautiful resource for people to call. And then come follow us on Instagram as well. So let's go to the questions. And I think, here we go. I'm going to start with the first question under Q&A. Okay. So it says, I was in a toxic, sex and love addicted marriage for 9 years. In my own recovery work, I am very confused about whether a man who watches porn can ever be a healthy partner. What a fantastic question. So to the person who wrote this, I see your name, but I'm not going to say it here. My best suggestion to you is you get to decide. You get to decide. If because of what you've been through, porn is not something that works for you in a relationship for your partner to be watching, then the answer is no. If you talk to your partner, and going back to what I said at the beginning here, that we need to be talking about it with our partners. What is our porn use? Can we be vulnerable enough to ask our partners, do you watch porn? How often? Does it interfere with our relationship in any way? And that person talks to you and is open and honest with you where there's no secrets, right? There's not like this secret life happening where you are like, wait, is he or she attracted to me? Am I doing something right or wrong? Because you're actually talking about what's going on. You have some intimacy in your relationship that you might decide, hey, with this partner and in this iteration of my life, I think I can be okay with it. So the confusion is going to be different for every person. And I just acknowledge you to check within yourself, talk to other people about it, talk to any partner about it. And if you say porn isn't okay, it's not okay, period. And then you're going to need, it is then your job to communicate that to the partners you're with if you decide that it's not okay. Lastly, and this might be a little bit of a repeat of what I already said, maybe there is healing around that for you to where you could see porn as no longer a threat to you, unless it is. So in your own personal work, That's a question for you to come to. And I think if you are a yes or no or a maybe, you've made the right decision. Okay, now to the chat questions. Let's see if I can get to this. Okay. Hi, Greg. My question is, how can a concerned wife or a female therapist bring up the issue of porn addiction with a very fragile, easily shamed man? Good question. I see many men in couples work who seem to be so fragile. Their wives and I suspect porn is involved, but fear they can't look at this behavior. It usually takes me about 1.5 years of relationship building before he is safe enough to bring it up. Wow, that's really fair. So it's going to be a case-by-case basis, but let me give you some of my guidelines. One of the things I would do is do everything I could do to de-shame the question, right? So in your own consciousness, can you hold that question? How is porn a part of your life, Joe, or whatever the person's name is, that you aren't holding energy to it? That comes first, so that when you ask it, it can be very joining and very calm. Another thing people do, and this has happened with me a lot as a clinician, is in couples work, or even if they work with a woman or a man who is afraid their partner is, addictive with pornography, is they send them to their own therapist. That way that person can go talk to somebody with confidentiality, and then potentially get the courage up, if they want to then be able to go talk about that in their relationship with their therapist. So the only thing I can suggest is just be so compassionate, lead with compassion, follow with compassion, finish with compassion. And then if someone is easily shamed by your question, you follow it up with, guess what, more compassion. So that you just really roll out the red carpet for them feeling comfortable. You might even say, as a clinician, I talk to a lot of men who watch a lot of porn, and it's okay. Or you might even say to the question, like, maybe let's talk next week about it, so they can think about what they want to say. But to just basically normalize it. Porn is happening, right? It's in everybody's life, whether they know it or not, even if it's the coworker, their friend, their partner, their parents, their kids. So to just normalize it. Hey, and to even say sometimes this is kind of an awkward topic, Joe, and I feel kind of awkward bringing it up, but I'm going to go ahead and ask you there, and I hope it's okay that I asked. That's my best suggestion. I hope that helped. Next question, how can women address toxic masculinity without shaming men? My best answer to that is you can talk about how it feels to be on the receiving end of it, or how it feels to be seeing it in the media, in politics, whatever it is. So not you're bad, you're wrong, you're sick, you're a sinner, whatever the words might be, but rather it hurts my feelings. This is how I wish you could interact with me. This is what makes me feel good. I would also champion the ways in the specific men that you're talking to that they are healthy. I so appreciate that moment where you stopped and you touched my arm and you asked how my day was. Did my interview go well? That helped me so much. And when there are times you don't do that, or times where you scold me or whatever, I think back to that time. I want more of those times. So this is a tricky thing. It's like I said a moment ago, it's like, can you de-shame it inside of yourself to the best of your ability? Can you heal, or at least be compassionate with the wounds inside of yourself, and then communicate to the person instead of saying, you're doing this, you shouldn't do this, you should, because that's hard for anybody, male, female, toxic, healthy, to hear that type of thing and then want to communicate. So that's my best suggestion, is to just, I've heard what you focus on expands. Focus on the good, communicate the good, and then talk about how it feels to be on the receiving end of what doesn't feel good to you. Next question says, would porn addiction treatment for women being treated the same way? Would it be a way to bring people together, or would the approach be inherently different? Well, it's a great question. And it's a tiny bit of a blind spot, I'm sorry to say, for me. I have had exactly 0 female porn addicts throughout the years come into my office. I've had some, here and there talk to, maybe in an intensive, but to come in and talk to me about what's going on in their life, there have been relatively few. So I know that there are treatment centers and there are therapists who treat female porn addiction. However, as far as treating it the same way, I would not, in fact, in SAA, Sex Addicts Anonymous, there tend to be mostly male meetings. And then in SLAA, Sex and Love Acts Anonymous, there are meetings for just women and some for just men. I think when you're healing from porn addiction, that's the best thing. to be in a homogenous group of people where it is not co-ed, where it's one gender. I would treat some of these things the same way. Yes. Now I'm going to, talk about the other side. A person addicted to anything has been medicating, numbing, distracting from that which they don't want to feel, right, on an everyday basis. So yes, that's the same for men and for women. I would work with clients on the same questions, right, the same assessment, and I think a lot of the same treatment as far as how do we go day by day, one day at a time, week by week, in getting your brain reset? Because with most people I work with, once the addiction stops and once we are able to actually do the work of the underlying emotions, we're dealing with trauma, whether overt trauma or relational. That is true for all genders. So those are the overlapped ways, but I would not, and this does happen, I would not send a woman to go to an all-male SAA meeting. I would send her to Sex and Love Acts Anonymous, just because that's where the women go. I hope that helped. Can educators get access to this presentation to share with counseling students? Yes, you can. This presentation right now is going to be put on the CHS YouTube channel. So they do it, I don't know when, it might take a day or two, it might take a week, but all of their live lectures and then all of their webinars are put on their YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube, Center for Healthy Sex, you can subscribe, you get all their videos there. And there's a video we did a few weeks ago that I did in person there that is also on their YouTube channel. It was a great crowd. We talked about a lot of things, a lot of overlap, and then some very different situations and very different things about working with the emotions in pornography. So feel free to check those out, watch them yourself, share them, and I hope they're really helpful. Hi, Greg. Do you see a difference in porn addicts depending on their age? Great question. Yes, yes, yes. Men in their 20s they have the most trouble. I've worked with men in their 20s and it's so difficult for them to stop. A lot of men that I work with right now who are in their 20s, when I say, when do you remember starting to watch internet pornography, high-speed internet pornography? 6 years old, 8 years old, 10, 12, 15. It breaks my heart. Back in the day, an 8-year-old seeing a picture of a naked person was a huge deal. Like the brain was going crazy when they saw that. We are not ready at these young ages for high-speed internet hardcore pornography, especially in the iteration that it is today. So men in their 20s, they need a longer break. They need a lot more connection with other people, and they know 1,000 better ways to get around the software than people my age do. So it's hard for anybody. I've worked with men in their 70s. I've worked with men in their early 20s and everything in between. And it's difficult, right? If somebody has been using this every day as their drug of choice, it's very difficult no matter what the age. But with young people, that is where sometimes they might need a higher level of care if they can't stop on their own. But getting them connected to other people online, that is a huge piece, right? These young people, it's all they do, Reddit. They know 10,000 times more about the internet than I do. So getting them connected with other people online, that is a huge thing in working with men in their 20s. But it is just harder because they've been doing it for longer and since they were younger. Next question. What's better during the try to stop phase? Exercising when horny, trying mindfulness? Is there something better or faster for rewiring? I think that is individual to the person, but connection. I try to hammer that into all my clients' brains. What is the best thing to do? Talk to somebody, hang out with your friends, go to an event, exercise. Absolutely. Get in your body. Like I said earlier, for the masculine energy, it is important. We're talking about men now. It is important, I guess all genders, of course, to get the blood pumping, right? To get the blood flowing through the body and get the brain in exercise mode. So to get embodied. However, when we do anything in isolation, like if someone said, it's fine, meditating is great, writing is great. The only thing that I would warn someone against is just don't have all of your other behaviors, what in SAA they call outer circle behaviors, healthy things to do because they're not going to be masturbating to pornography. Just make sure all those aren't alone and secluded, right? Make sure you're touching base with other people. Next question, can two consenting adults participate in behavior like choking or slapping without it being eroticized rage? Great question. This goes back to one of the first things I said. I didn't cover this topic, but in Alex Katahakis is such a way shower on this topic. Yes, absolutely. Willing consensual adult participants, it can be fun, it can be sexy, it can be hot. I wouldn't want to, nor can anyone say, that's eroticized rage. You have anger and shame and hurt you're not dealing with. We can't say that to people. What we can say, what I would say to people is, make sure you're processing why that's hot to you. It might just be hot because it's hot, right? I don't want to stigmatize or demonize anything. I think it's like, and by the way, same with all kinds of BDSM behavior. If someone is doing that addictively, we want to help them get their life back. But that doesn't mean that they have to stop that behavior. That doesn't mean that that's wrong or bad. That might be what they love and what's hot to them. And what's so important about that is making sure they aren't re-traumatizing something inside of them. So yes, absolutely, they can do it, and it's not hurting anybody. It's not hurting themselves. But yet again, and Alex says this on the podcast I referred to earlier on A Brave New Man, what you find rough sex and what I find as rough sex, let me say that again. What you define as rough sex and what I define as rough sex might be two very different things. So it's so important to be, even if it's a less hot, right? Or if it kills the moment, if you're talking about having any kind of slapping or choking or any kind of rough sex behavior, you need to be explicit about what that does and does not include. And you have to be clear and checking in with your partner, especially if it's a new sexual relationship, that you're still within the boundaries of what you agreed upon. But absolutely, yes, it can just be fun for people and it not be eroticized rage at all. How would I know if I need to refer a porn addicted client to a higher level of care like an intensive? Great question. What I usually say is, if you can stop through 12-step, through therapy, or through coaching, or through just your own, stopping for a sustained period of time, there's a saying in 12-step, in addiction treatment, we can stop. We just can't stay stopped. So sure, anybody, even a hardcore addict, can stop for a week or even a month. But once they start again, they're off to the races. They say in AA, it's the first drink that gets you drunk. So I talked about that with porn addicts. What's your first drink? They say, well, can I look at Instagram? Can I watch YouTube videos? Well, is that your first drink? Does that open up the obsessive channels in your brain where suddenly you're needing to do it all the time? Now, if someone can stop without anything other than the things I just mentioned, there's no need for a higher level of care. I have absolutely worked with people who came and they just couldn't stop and couldn't stop and couldn't stop. And we tried everything and they read everything and they're in program and they have the blockers. Then it's time to consider an intensive. CHS has a phenomenal 2-week intensive for men and for women. And a lot of people who have suffered from porn addiction and sex addiction have come through and come out the other side feeling like changed people. So that is an outpatient program. There's also for people whose lives and brains are just so mired in this addiction that they can't get out of it, that they go to inpatient treatment. There are many sex addiction inpatient treatments. If you're wondering what any of those are for your clients, call CHS. They have a phenomenal roster of who to refer to. But yes, try to stop on their own with help, I should say, with all the resources we talked about. And if they can't, over and over and over again, 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, they just keep acting out, is what it's called in porn addiction treatment, then it's time to refer them to a higher level of care, inpatient or outpatient. What if a client says they don't have any trauma or unresolved issues from their childhood? So great question. We could talk for an hour about this, but let me give you a 1 or 2 second sentence answer. Trauma is frequently misunderstood as people who have gone through life-threatening or severe violent abuse or severe sexual abuse. Of course, all of that is trauma. It's what we know is trauma. Relational trauma is something that we don't talk about as much out loud, we don't understand as much, and that I think a lot of us have. Were we made to feel less than, ashamed, embarrassed? We had to caretake our mom, caretake our dad, or any caregiver, where we were raised in such a way that we felt that our own unique sense of self wasn't inherently lovable or beautiful or worthy, where we feel like we are less than. That is trauma. And I haven't yet met the person in therapy or out of therapy, now that I think about it, who hasn't gone through some form of relational trauma. So people do come in and say, oh, I came from the perfect family. Oh, my parents were great. Yeah, they were wonderful. No trauma. Okay, I'm not trying to burst their bubble, that maybe their parents were amazing. But in what ways were their sense of self harmed throughout their upbringing, to the point where they needed something, a pathological relationship with a drug or an experience, to get them out of the reality of what it feels like to just be me? So that's the trauma I would explore with them. Next question. Thank you, Greg. You're welcome. Do you have any other tips for female students and women to help men express healthy masculinity? Aside from the few things I said earlier, I would say for women I know in my personal life and professionally, I would say love and embrace your femininity and your own driven parts of your masculinity. Heal the parts inside of you that would label something driven as toxic or bad or wrong if it's not. What I mean to say by that is check our own filters. Am I putting something on you that doesn't belong there? However, in most cases, I would say for women to talk to the men that they love about what they love about them, about the specific healthy parts of their masculinity that they love. Again, what we focus on expands. So that's my best answer to that question, is to engage with men, show that vulnerability, that openness, model for men what it means to be empathetic and loving, what it means to communicate, right? What it means to love, to see someone as worthy and valuable, whether they're doing what you love right now in this moment. So for you to be the way shower basically is one of the other ways I would say for women to really be able to show men what it is to open up their hearts, because it is safe. We just don't know it, some of us, because we were trained not to. We were hurt in the past. So why wouldn't we, right? Why wouldn't men shut down these parts of their masculinity, shut down their vulnerability if they were hurt for showing it when they were little? Just curious, what are some highlights from your podcast so far? Perhaps not guests or moments, or rather some takeaways about the process of starting or running one. This could be a 5-hour conversation. Thank you so much for that question. I've had the opportunity to deal with my own feelings of my own inadequacies, my own shortcomings, my own, what's that called? Why can't I think of it? But the ways that I lie to myself and say that I don't measure up. As soon as I end this meeting, I'll remember the word. But so it's been a challenge for me to really listen to myself and know that, that this is bad, good, people love it or hate it, that it just is, it's what's right for me. And hopefully that helps people. And I've heard back that it does help people. And some highlights, there are huge roadblocks, huge pitfalls, things I ran into I didn't know, but I had to go through it, right? So it's like anything. I had to be in my own vulnerability and be in my own healing. In the own ways, my toxic masculinity would come where I'd want to like punch the wall or yell or something, where I had to realize that like, yeah, this is meaningful to me. So it's challenged and helped me be in my own healthy masculinity and my own unhealthy masculinity as part of preaching it. And I think that happens when we're supposed to teach something, it comes up for us, right? So we can heal it inside of ourselves. And I have learned from every single guest I've had. It's been amazing. Things that I say as if I'm the authority. Many times I'm quoting people that I've heard who talk about masculinity, femininity, consent, relationships, trauma in ways that I've never thought of before. So it's been beautiful. Somebody says, super great. That's all congruent with my style. Thank you much. You're so welcome. CHS just put my website on the chat. And also, oh, great. That's awesome. A link to my Instagram and then to the specific one, specific episode with Alex and I talking about consent. So thank you, CHS, for putting it on there. And then the last comment says, very well done. Well, thank you. So it looks like there is one more question here under the Q&A. What can I do as the partner to help make sure my husband isn't internalizing or repressing his feelings without overstepping my role? Wow, what a great question. What can I do as the partner to help sure my husband isn't internalizing or repressing his feelings without overstepping my role? Okay, so here's what I would say. Be empathetic to the fact that he might be internalizing or repressing. Tell him that. Say, I get this is weird and scary sometimes. It's okay if this doesn't feel comfortable. I understand. You might say, if you're a woman, as a girl, I was allowed to play. I was allowed to be, let my mind wander. I was allowed to be creative and show my feelings. I was allowed to cry without being made fun of, if that's true, by the way. You weren't. So I am open to more. I am open to you sharing your vulnerability. And here's one thing you can really do. let him know, if this is true, that he won't pay a price for it, for sharing his feelings with you, that is. If something you said hurt his feelings yesterday, well, if you're asking him to be more open, then meet him there. You can say, that hurts my feelings too, or I feel hurt. You don't have to be perfect or robotic. You get to be human too. But to basically pave the way by saying this is a safe space, and then make it a safe space. If it's not safe, right? If the communication is abusive or in some way passive aggressive or gaslighting, or you feel like you're being manipulated by him, well then no, then that's not okay. And you need to let him know that too. But overstepping our role with our partner, I don't care what gender we are. If I go to my partner and I say, hey, you need to tell me this, you need to tell me that, that's not fair, you know, you're not doing enough of this. Well, I don't know any partner, like I said earlier, who wouldn't want to shut down in that. That's not relational, it's not intimate, and it just doesn't sound healthy to me. But what you can do is open your heart and say, and carve out time. This is one thing I say, especially to the people I work with who are in recovery, and even if they're not. Hey, can we sit for like 5 minutes a week, 10 minutes a week, and just talk about our feelings? Can we try that? This goofy guy on a webinar said it. Can we just try that? Can we see if that works for us and see how that feels? And if it's clumsy, that's okay. And if it's cool, then let's keep doing it. But just, those are several different ways to kind of step into it without you taking the police officer role or the teacher role or the therapist role, because you don't want that. And I know your partner doesn't want that too. So I believe we've answered all the questions. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's been so lovely to talk about this, and I like to think I could feel people's collective energy as we talked about it. And any questions, like I said, please feel free to contact me or CHS. Let me just go back to one last thing and finish. Be compassionate toward yourself. Be compassionate toward addicts who can't stop a behavior. If they're crossing your boundaries, you have every right to put up your boundaries and say, it is not okay for you to do this in our marriage or in our relationship. It is not okay with me, and it needs to change. But realize in your heart, they're suffering, you're suffering. Hold boundaries you need to hold, but also love the hell out of yourself and your partner, and realize that it's like compassion, open-heartedness, talking about our feelings, owning our own, and loving people for their feelings. That's a road to intimacy. Thanks so much, everybody.